A fae.
What would you do if a non-human creature looked you in the eyes and tried to say, safe? This isn't science fiction. This isn't a myth. This is a real creature, and it's learning to communicate like a human. In the dead of winter 1993, a blizzard swallowed a quiet mountain town in Wyoming. That night, a young forest ranger burst into a vet clinic, holding something wrapped in soaked blankets. Not an animal. Not quite human. It was small, shivering, injured. But when the vet whispered, "You're safe here," it looked up and tried to say it back. That was the beginning. What no one expected was that this creature, yes, creature, was learning. Watching mouths, mimicking sounds, even showing signs of empathy. And the 3 gentle knocks it made, they weren't random. They were a ritual. A request for peace, and the forest answered. This is not just a story about Bigfoot. It's about language, fear, kindness, and what happens when we choose to protect instead of capture. But here's what we'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching from? What's your name, dear listener? And how far do you think this story could go? If this touched something in you, like it did for us, send a wave back by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and helping us grow a community of hearts who believe Bigfoot might just be real and worthy of compassion. From our forest to yours, thank you. The wind had teeth that night. It screamed down from the high ridges of Sinks Canyon, howling through frozen pine and scraping the edges of Lander, Wyoming, like it meant to peel the roofs right off. Snow didn't fall. It attacked. Thick, wet white battering sideways, blinding headlights, clogging streets, making ghosts of the street lamps and shadows of every shape. And in the middle of it, down a side road half swallowed by snowbanks, a dim, blinking neon sign tried to stay alive. A red cross barely pulsing behind rattling glass. Ketteridge Veterinary Clinic. Inside, the storm became a whisper. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly. The smell of iodine and old wood lingered in the air, mixing with faint traces of wet fur and something sterile, something lonely. Dr. Marion Ketteridge, 52, moved through the quiet space with the muscle memory of a life built on precision. She wiped down her metal tray, shut the drawer with a solid click, and bent to check the old iron stove in the corner, nudging another log inside. A small ritual. Heat. Light, order, against the chaos clawing just beyond the walls. She didn't hum. Marion wasn't a woman who filled silences. She was just reaching to shut off the front lights when the glass door shook so hard it nearly cracked in its frame. She froze. A second later, the handle jiggled violently. Then a fist thumped hard against the door, 3 times, fast. She moved, automatic, and opened it halfway, bracing her shoulder behind the frame. The wind shoved inside first, bringing with it a man, Landon Pike, 34. Deputy sheriff's badge barely visible under his soaked parka. His breath was ragged, face raw from cold, and in his arms was something wrapped in what looked like every towel from the back seat of a patrol truck. "She's hurt," he panted, eyes wide but locked on Marion's. "Didn't know where else. Just, please." Marion's gaze dropped. The bundle moved. Not a dog, not a coyote, not a thing she had a name for. Just fur, dark, coarse, wet to the skin, and a shape that shouldn't have existed. Small as a house cat, but limbs too long, face too flat. One leg twisted at a wrong angle. The thing was trembling, barely breathing. Marion didn't blink. "Close the door," she said evenly. "More towels, now." Landon obeyed without a word. The next few minutes passed in a blur of warm water, antiseptic, gauze, and silence. Marion laid the creature on the heated table in the exam room and peeled the wet towels back, layer by layer. Underneath, its skin was bruised, patchy, the fur clumped with dirt and sap. The left leg, she could see now. was dislocated at the hip, not just broken. There were raw indentations near the ankle, as if something had wrapped tight and twisted. A loop. She didn't ask questions. She worked, wrapping the leg, rehydrating the creature slowly, drop by drop with warm saline through a tiny catheter. Her hands were steady, even as her mind flicked through every chart, every anatomy book, every species she'd ever touched or treated. Nothing matched. She muttered under her breath, barely audible, as she cleaned around a shallow wound near its ribs. "You're safe here." The thing flinched. Then its eyes, startlingly round, dark and wet, locked on her mouth. It didn't blink. A second passed. Then two. It opened its mouth. The sound was rasped, broken, like a throat that had never quite learned to use air. "Saifu." Marion froze. She felt the hair rise on her arms. Behind her, Landon inhaled sharply. "Jesus!" The creature's hand moved, slowly, reaching toward her wrist. Marion didn't pull away. It touched her, 3 light taps, rhythmic, not panicked, just a signal. Tap, tap, tap. She paused, like the motion had spoken louder than any word. Her fingers eased. The air in the room shifted. "Did you tell anyone?" she asked, still looking down. Landon hesitated. "I radioed for backup. Said I needed emergency medical. I didn't—" He rubbed his face with a trembling hand. I said it wasn't a bear. I didn't mean—" Marion's eyes met his. "Someone's gonna come looking," she said flatly. Landon swallowed. "I know." She didn't yell, didn't curse, just turned back to the creature, who had started to curl in on itself again, exhausted. The towels were wet through, and Marion reached for a fresh one. That's when she noticed something caught in the folds. A strip of braided dry grass tied in a simple knot. Not random. Tidy. Deliberate. "Did you do this?" she asked Landon. He looked over. "No." The thing on the table stirred. Marion looked again at the marks on the leg. Those weren't from falling. They were from something wrapped, twisted, pulled tight. A snare. Her gut turned cold. She adjusted the leg. Gentler now. Outside, the wind banged something loose against the wall. Marion looked toward the rear hallway. Then she heard it. A faint metallic scrape. At the back door, Landon was already moving, pulling the flashlight from his belt. Marion moved the light switch down, one by one, dimming the front of the clinic until only the glow from the stove and her lamp over the table remained. She walked toward the back. The hallway was long, narrow, lined with shelves of supplies. At the far end, the back door was shut, but the handle was twitching, not like the wind. Controlled. A twist, a pause, another twist. Her hand hovered over the edge of the counter, fingers brushing the drawer where the old crowbar lived. "Marion," Landon whispered. He was behind her now, light trained on the doorknob. Outside, the storm raged, but the door didn't shake from the wind. It was being tested, turned. Then it stopped. They waited. Silence. Back in the exam room, the creature stirred again, weakly. It turned its head toward the hallway, chest rising and falling too fast. Marion stepped back in, moved between it and the door like a shield. Its eyes found hers again, not pleading, just watching. Like it needed to know what she would do before deciding what it would. She didn't reach for a weapon. She reached for a blanket, draped it gently over its small frame. "All right," she murmured. "I've got you." Another bang at the back, louder. Landon swore under his breath. Marion didn't flinch. She stood her ground, one hand on the edge of the table, the other hanging loose by her side. The lights flickered once, and then everything was still, except the breathing behind her, shallow, steady. She kept her eyes on the door, and waited. The storm wasn't over. It had just found the place it wanted to break through. By morning, the storm had quieted to a hush, the kind that made everything feel paused. Snowbanks rose like frozen waves along the streets of Lander, Wyoming, crusted with a brittle sheen under a sky that hadn't yet decided whether to turn blue or stay gray. The roads were barely passable. Tire tracks wound through slush like veins through skin. But people came anyway, on foot, in boots, wrapped in coats and wool scarves, drawn not by sirens or alarms, but by something quieter, stranger, older. Something like instinct. By 8 o'clock, there were already 5 or 6 townsfolk standing across the street from the Ketteridge Veterinary Clinic. By 9, there were more than a dozen. They didn't shout. No one banged on the door or held up signs. They just stood there, watching the front windows like something inside might move. Inside, Marion watched back from behind drawn curtains. She had unplugged the neon sign at dawn and flipped the wooden closed placard on the front door, but it hadn't made a difference. The clinic felt smaller now. Not in size, but in the way a place shrinks when secrets begin pressing against its walls. The creature was still alive, sleeping now, under heat lamps and blankets, its breathing thin but steady. Marion hadn't slept at all. Her hands moved automatically through the motions of cleaning, feeding, checking vitals. Her mind stayed fixed on the night before, the metal sound at the door, the look in its eyes, the way it had tried to speak. There was a knock at the back entrance. She opened it just a sliver. Ruby Gaines stood there, cheeks red from the cold, a brown paper bag tucked under one arm. 16, thin as a reed but bright-eyed, wearing a mismatched knit hat that someone had clearly made by hand. "I brought eggs," she said, "and oatmeal. Thought maybe." Her voice trailed off as she peeked inside. Marion hesitated, then stepped back to let her in. Ruby had grown up in this town, but she hadn't grown of it. Her parents ran the local diner. Her older brother had left for the army, and she spent more time at the clinic than at home. She was the only person Marion let behind the counter without permission. When her eyes landed on the creature, she didn't scream. She didn't run. She froze, hand still clutching the paper bag, and stared. It was the eyes. That's what stopped her breath. Not fear, not revulsion, recognition. She moved closer without realizing. "That's not a coyote," she whispered. "No." "Or a bear cub." "No. It's not anything." Marion didn't correct her. The creature stirred, and Ruby stepped back, heart hammering. But the thing didn't lash out. It opened its eyes slowly, groggy, looked at her. She didn't know why she felt the urge to whisper. "Hi." Its brow twitched. Not in confusion, like it was listening. Then it closed its eyes again, as if that effort had cost something. Marion took the bag from Ruby and nodded toward the counter. "Help me clean." Outside, snow crunched under new boots. Wade Halverson appeared at the front door, wiping his hands on the sides of his jeans. All practiced friendliness and artificial warmth. Wade ran the gun shop on Main, had the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He leaned forward and tapped gently on the glass, peering in like a man at a zoo exhibit. Ruby whispered, "Do not open that." "I won't." But Wade didn't go away. He cupped his hands to the window, trying to see through the gaps in the curtains. Landon arrived moments later, jaw tight, uniform jacket still dusted with road salt. He approached Wade from the side, voice low. "Something I can help you with?" Wade smiled, like they were old friends. "Heard Marion had her hands full. Thought I'd see if she needed a man's help." "You been up in Sinks Canyon lately?" Wade's eyes flicked to him. "What's it to you? Just heard you had a few traps out that way." "Nothing illegal," Wade said evenly. "I tagged my lines, asked the sheriff." Landon didn't push, but his expression said he'd filed something away. Sheriff Orson Bale showed up around noon. He didn't knock. He called Marion's landline. When she picked up, he didn't waste time. "I'm outside, let me in." She cracked the door open and stepped aside without a word. Bale was tall, wide-shouldered, with a mustache that belonged in another decade. He looked around the clinic like it was a crime scene, not a place that had saved hundreds of pets over the years. "I heard you got something strange in here." "I've got something injured," Marion said. He sniffed. "And you plan to report it?" "I plan to treat it." "Marion, I'm not hiding anything," she said calmly. "I'm doing what I've always done." Bale didn't argue. Not directly. If it's not a known species, It needs to be documented. Turned over to the state, maybe even the feds. You're assuming it survived the night." He tilted his head. "Didn't it?" She didn't answer. Bale stepped closer, lowered his voice. "I'm trying to protect you here. You're not the only one who saw something." "I know." He left without forcing the issue, but Marion knew that kind of silence. Pressure deferred, not removed. Later that afternoon, Wade returned. This time he brought venison jerky wrapped in butcher paper and a story about how he just wanted to help. The creature tensed the moment Wade entered the building. Its entire body locked up. It made a low, vibrating sound. Not a growl, not even a whine. Just rhythm, Marion noticed. Then she noticed where its eyes landed. Wade's jacket, the oil-dark leather, the faint metallic smell. Something about it made the creature recoil. After Wade left, it tapped Marion's arm again, 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. She sat beside it and didn't say a word. The knock at the back that evening was quieter. Pastor Gideon Crowell. Black wool coat, silver hair swept neatly back, eyes too tired for judgment. He didn't ask questions. He just held out a casserole dish and a loaf of sourdough wrapped in cloth. "Snow melts faster when people stay warm," he said. Marion thanked him. Before he left, he glanced around, not trying to see anything, just sensing the air. Some mercies don't belong to crowds. She watched him walk back through the snow, each step deliberate, as if he knew he was being watched. Later, Ruby caught something strange in the back room. A man standing awkwardly by the rear shelves, claiming he was there to donate blankets. But there was a red light peeking through his coat pocket. Marion lifted the hem of his jacket before he could react. A small camcorder, running. Calder Voss, 29, part-time documentarian, full-time opportunist. "This is for a film," he stammered. "About the wildlife corridors, preservation stuff." Marion didn't say anything. Ruby reached over and shut off the camera without asking. Calder left. As the sun went down, the crowd outside finally thinned. That's when the note slid under the door. Just a scrap of paper, no name. "Don't move it." Marion stared at the words for a long time. She didn't show Ruby. But later, as she wrapped the creature's leg again, she said softly, "If they call it a monster, don't you do it." Ruby blinked hard and nodded. That night, the cold returned. A clean, brittle quiet settled over the town. But somewhere beyond the last fences, down where the Popo Agie River carved its way through rock and whispering trees, 3 distant knocks answered the dark. The snow along the gutters had turned gray at the edges, softening just enough to drip like the town itself had started sweating. Lander had that look it wore after a storm, like a room that had been ransacked and put back together too fast. The kind of calm where people whisper more than they talk, like the quiet is doing its best to hold. Word had spread, not in shouts or newsprint, but over gas pumps and beneath diner counters. Folks didn't say exactly what it was, but they said something strange was being kept alive in the vet's office, and that was enough. Inside, the light from the windows didn't quite reach the far corner of the exam room where the creature lay curled, half buried in blankets. Its breathing had steadied, but it hadn't spoken again. Not since that broken little whisper, "Safe," that still echoed in Marion's head, soft and cracked like the voice of something trying to remember how to be. She'd been talking to it now and then, short words, not expecting much, just to see if it responded. Sometimes it watched her mouth. Sometimes it blinked in time with her speech. But mostly, it just listened. Late morning, the door opened quietly, and Landon stepped inside with a woman Marion had never met in person. Dr. Inez Marr was taller than Marion expected. Wide-shouldered, not in a way that looked imposing, but in a way that suggested she could carry weight without complaint. 38 maybe, with dark curly hair pulled into a tight bun, and a worn leather satchel slung over her shoulder. She looked like someone who packed for long winters and never trusted that batteries would last. "Dr. Marr," Marion said. "Inez is fine." She held out a hand, cold from outside, but firm. Landon stepped back like he'd already decided this was above his pay grade. Inez unslung the satchel and set it on the table, pulling out a few items. A small tape recorder, a thick spiral notebook, a cracked travel mirror, and a pencil sharpened to half its length. "Where is it?" she asked, voice low. Marion nodded toward the blankets. The creature blinked once, slow, then turned its head slightly toward the new presence. Inez didn't approach. She just crouched at a distance, set the mirror at an angle so she could see its face without staring directly. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she made a note on the pad, then another. Marion didn't interrupt. After a while, Inez spoke. One word. "Hello." The creature blinked, waited. Then it said, "Huh?" Its voice had changed slightly. Higher pitch, less gravel. Then again, this time sharper. "Hello." It wasn't a perfect mimic. There was intent behind it, like it had filed the first try away and adjusted. Inez's eyes lit up, but she didn't smile. She only nodded once and said to Marion, "It's correcting itself. That's language acquisition, not imitation." Marion felt her chest tighten, not in fear, but awe. It's not just mimicking sounds. No, it's testing them, running them through something internal. Could be phonetic mapping, could be social learning. The creature was staring again, not at either of them, but at Inez's mouth. Inez leaned slightly forward. "What's your name?" The thing tilted its head, then tapped its own chest once with long fingers, then looked at them expectantly. "That's a social cue," Inez muttered. "Gesture before response, like a protocol." Then it tapped Marion's arm, 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Then back to its chest. Then the same rhythm again. Inez scribbled something down. "That pattern's repeating. It always does it in 3s, Marion said, when it's asking or answering or ending something." Inez nodded slowly. Might be a kind of nonverbal grammar, ritualized signaling, like saying please or may I, but built around rhythm instead of words. The creature seemed to be listening to them. It didn't look sleepy now. It looked like a student trying to keep up. Ruby poked her head in through the hallway. "There's a guy with a clipboard out front asking for Dr. Marr from Laramie." Inez sighed. "Tell him I'll call him when I'm ready." Ruby nodded and slipped back out. The creature's eyes followed her. When Ruby reappeared with more blankets and a small plastic container of yogurt, it perked up slightly. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. It watched her mouth as she spoke, then repeated, "Hey." Ruby nearly dropped the spoon. "Holy crap." Inez held up a hand. "Talk to it again, but clearly, slowly." Ruby nodded, flustered. "You want some?" It tilted its head, looked at the yogurt, then at her. Then, in a low rasp, "Want some?" "Jesus," Ruby whispered. "It's like a toddler." "No," Inez said. "It's like a linguist who hasn't been given the tools yet." Marion stepped closer. "It only does this with her. It doesn't talk around Sheriff Bale or Wade." Inez turned to her. "That matters. It's distinguishing between people, not just reacting to threat. It's choosing who to engage with." Marion said nothing, but she was thinking about the way it had cowered from Wade's jacket, the way it had stared into his eyes like remembering something sharp. Inez reached into her bag and pulled out a slim flashlight with a soft lens filter. She shined it near, not at the creature's eyes, watching the dilation. Then she shifted the light to her own mouth and said a word. "Sky." The creature watched, then repeated with difficulty. "Sky." Not just sound, shape, tongue, lips, throat. It was reading her. Inez was writing so fast the pencil broke. They kept going like that for nearly an hour. Short, simple words. Hello, want, sky, cold, food. It never said more than 1 or 2 at a time, but it was learning. Not memorizing, understanding. Marion glanced at the clock. "You need a break?" "I need a lifetime," Inez muttered, then rubbed her eyes. But yeah, a break would be good. They stepped out into the side hallway. The air was cooler there, dry and still. and Marion poured 2 small paper cups of coffee from the burner that hadn't been cleaned in 2 years. "How long can you stay?" 2, maybe 3 days, Inez said. "After that, if I don't report in, they'll send someone less interested in mercy." Marion didn't smile. "I saw a light outside last night," she said. "Far end of the alley. Thought it was nothing. Scanner said someone was near the old utility shed." "You check?" Landon's voice came from the hallway.
"I did."
He joined them, rubbing at the edge of his jaw. "You're not imagining it. There's movement out there. Someone circling, but not coming in." Marion's mind went to the braid of grass. The snare marks. Not Wade?
"No, too careful. These steps weren't going toward us. They were going around."
Marion narrowed her eyes. "Like they were avoiding town." Landon nodded. "Like they knew how close they could get without being seen." Back inside, Ruby sat near the creature with a paperback open in her lap, reading aloud like it was just any other afternoon. The creature listened, eyes half-lidded. Then, when she stopped, it lifted a hand and tapped the edge of the table. 3 times. Not to her. To the wall. They all turned. The sound echoed slightly. A hollow, wooden reverberation. Marion's heart slowed. "That wasn't to us," she said. Inez walked toward the back of the room. "Where's that coming from?" "Behind the siding," Ruby said. "There's a power pole maybe 50 feet down, runs along the edge of the riverwalk." Inez opened the rear door just a crack. Cold wind licked at her face. Beyond the alley, past the dumpsters and low shrubs, stood a single wooden pole with a transformer mounted crookedly near the top. It looked like nothing, just another piece of the town, but the air around it felt different, like it had recently been shared. They stood there a moment longer, watching. Then, from the far end of the river corridor, 3 deep knocks rolled back. Not loud, not urgent, just enough. The creature lifted its head and exhaled, not in fear, in recognition. Marion didn't sleep. Not really. Not with the sound of her own heart keeping time with every creak in the floorboards, every branch tapping the clinic windows like a question waiting to be asked. The storm had passed days ago, but the tension hadn't. It just changed shape, like the cold that lingered in the bones of the town long after the snow had melted from the roads. She moved through the rooms like a woman waiting for something to fall. The creature, no, the child, because that's what it looked like now, was curled in the kennel corner, wrapped in the old army blanket she'd used for orphaned deer years back. Its breathing was slower, calmer, but never deep enough for real sleep. Landon had come by early, coffee in hand, eyes rimmed with red. He stood at the edge of the counter, watching Marion watch the door. "People are talking more," he said. "They were already talking," she replied. "Yeah, but now they're listening too." Marion didn't need to ask who he meant. Rumors moved faster in Lander than snowmelt down the Popo Aggie. A girl at the diner said she saw something in the alley. A retired game warden whispered over coffee about untagged footprints. Someone down at the gas station said the vet lady had taken in a creature that wasn't quite of this world. They all wanted to believe something was happening. They just didn't know whether to love it or hunt it. That afternoon, Sheriff Bale returned. He didn't knock, just opened the door like it was still his to walk through. "We need to talk." Marion didn't rise from her stool. She just looked at him with the same tired steadiness she always had, as if daring him to speak plain. "You know the rules," he said. "If what you've got in here is unknown, if it's a species not cataloged, it needs to be reported." "It's not hurting anyone." "That's not the point." "No," Marion said, "but it should be." Bale's jaw flexed. He glanced toward the closed exam room door, as if trying to see through it with sheer will. "You think I don't get what this is?" he said, quieter now. "You think I don't understand what it could mean? Then leave it alone. You're not just making a personal choice here. You're hiding something that might put you and everyone else in danger." Marion stood up then, slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're wrong," she said. "I'm protecting something that's already been hurt." He didn't argue further, but when he left, he shut the door harder than necessary, the kind of closing that wanted to feel like control. Later, when the wind picked up again, Landon found the envelope. It hadn't been there that morning. Hadn't been slipped in by the mailman. Just left. Pressed under the front mat in a plain manila sleeve. No stamp, no writing. Nothing but a single Polaroid photograph inside. Marion pulled it out, turned it over, and felt the muscles in her stomach tighten. The photo was of the clinic's side window, taken at night, from the alley. You could see the curtain pulled only part way, and through the small gap, the reflection of her hand resting on the table beside the cage. It wasn't grainy. It wasn't rushed. Someone had stood there in the dark, long enough to frame it just right. "They're watching us," Landon said. "No," Marion whispered. "They're watching it." She burned the photo in the stove, not because she thought it would erase the threat, but because she didn't want it staying in the room like a ghost. The next morning, Landon took his truck and followed the edge of the river corridor, past the utility poles and the overgrown fence line where the tree cover started to thicken. He moved slowly, looking for signs. Not just tracks, but intent. He found it a half-mile down. A set of prints larger than any he'd seen in the area, longer than his boot by half, wide like someone had walked barefoot through the snow. But they didn't cut through town. They curved around it, circled like they knew where not to step. Landon crouched, tracing the edge of one print with his glove. Whoever, or whatever, left it hadn't been curious. They'd been careful. Back at the clinic, Marion ran her fingers gently along the creature's leg again. The healing was slow. Not impossible, but slow. She studied the scar, the odd indent still visible beneath the fur. It wasn't from a fall. It wasn't random. She'd seen wounds like this before, twisting, tightening, a snare. She turned the leg gently, checking for nerve damage. The child flinched. Not in pain, but like it remembered something. She said quietly, "Did someone do this to you?" It didn't answer. Just looked at her with that calm, bottomless stare that had started to feel older than its size. But its hand moved again. Tap, tap, tap. That afternoon, Wade came by again. He didn't come to the door. Just stood on the sidewalk across the street, arms folded, pretending to smoke a cigarette that was already burned halfway down. Ruby spotted him from the back room window. "He's not watching the building," she said. "He's watching the shadows." Marion stepped up beside her. Sure enough, Wade wasn't looking at the clinic. He was staring at the space between buildings, the narrow mouth of the alley that led toward the river. "I think he knows," Ruby whispered. "He knows something," Marion said. Later that night, the power flickered. It wasn't the weather. The lines were clear. The wind was low. But the lights buzzed out for just long enough to make the silence ring in their ears. When they came back, Marion checked the panel. Everything looked fine, but her gut was already braced. She didn't say anything out loud, but she stayed close to the cage, listening. It wasn't long after that she heard it. The faint click of the back door lock. Not forced, finessed. She moved without sound, crossing to the hallway in 3 steps. Landon wasn't there. He'd gone home an hour ago. Ruby was upstairs, asleep on the cot she refused to call a bed. Marion held her breath and listened. The door creaked. Just a little. A sliver. Someone had the key. Someone who knew the lock. A figure stepped inside. Not rushed, not clumsy. Just quiet. Just looking. They didn't go for the cabinets, didn't open the drawers. They walked straight past the counter, past the sink, past the shelves. Stopped at the cage. The child inside didn't move, didn't cry out. It only stared. The figure leaned forward slightly. The light caught the side of a face, a cheek, a jawline, a pair of dark eyes that didn't blink. Marion saw the shape of a man, maybe in his 30s, not Wade, not Bale, not anyone she recognized. He didn't open the cage, didn't reach inside. He just stood there and watched. And then, just as silently, he turned and walked back the way he came. The door clicked shut behind him. Marion didn't move until long after he was gone. She waited, heart racing in her throat, then stepped forward and locked the door again, this time bolting it from the inside. She didn't wake Ruby. She didn't call Landon. She went back to the cage, sat down on the floor beside it, and wrote something on a scrap of paper torn from an old prescription pad. She folded it twice, slid it through the bars. The child reached for it with gentle fingers, looked at it, then looked at her. The words were simple. Don't let the world make you pray. That was all she could give it tonight. No weapons, no promises, just that. Then the wind outside changed. Not a howl, not a gust, just a shift. The door at the front swung open hard enough to slam against the wall. Marion jumped up. Ruby's voice shouted down the stairs. The lights flickered again. At the edge of the room, the cage rattled. Something had grabbed it, not gently. The scent of barbecue drifted on the warm wind, tangling with pine smoke and gasoline, settling in the streets like a memory the town wanted to believe in. It was the summer festival, the one with hay bales for seats and lights strung across Maine like stars caught in netting. Kids chased each other with melted snow cones. Couples danced awkwardly in boots. A raffle drum spun slow beside the fire station. From the outside, Lander looked alive. But inside the clinic, where the light didn't reach and the laughter couldn't echo, Marion stood motionless, her back to the world. The power had gone out 15 minutes earlier. Not the whole block. Just them. Just the building that had started to feel more like a heartbeat than a structure. No storm this time. No wind. Just the sharp click of loss and the hum of stillness that followed. Marion moved through the dark without hesitation. Years of knowing every step by feel. Ruby followed close, flashlight beam small and nervous, cutting across jars and cabinets like a finger trying to read Braille. The child wasn't panicked. That was the first thing Marion noticed. It was alert, eyes open, body stiff, but not wild. No thrashing, no sound. It sat in the corner of the kennel, watching. Its gaze moved not to the light, but to Marion's face, as if reading her next move. "I've got you," she said, barely more than a whisper. They lit 2 lanterns, one for the main room, one for the cage. The flicker cast long shadows across the walls, warping shelves into crooked shoulders, twisting the air between them into something that felt watched. The backup generator hadn't kicked in. Landon was supposed to check it, but tonight he was covering the fairgrounds, babysitting drunks and keeping Wade from bragging too loud. Outside, the town pulsed with music. Inside, the clinic pulsed with something else. That's when Marion heard them. Voices. Not close, but not far enough. She motioned to Ruby to stay down. Slipped toward the back hall, past the freezer, past the cot Ruby slept on when she refused to go home. The voices weren't raised. That's what made them worse. Calm voices. Confident ones. She didn't hear names. Just pieces. Back door's got a twist lock. Don't need to hurt it. Buyer's ready. They're not local. She froze. Marion had heard plenty of conversations behind closed doors. From game officials, from out-of-town biologists, from her own father when he thought she was asleep. But this one didn't sound like science. It sounded like ownership. She recognized one voice. A man from the tire shop, Doug Dunning. Mid-40s, always in debt, always smiling too wide. And someone else, deeper, slower. That voice made her bones tighten. "Wade!" She stepped back into the main room, shutting the hallway door softly behind her. "They're planning something," she said. Ruby was kneeling by the cage, arms around her knees. "What do we do?" We stay with it. No one opens any doors unless I say." But even as she said it, the tension had shifted. The building was being tested again, not by force, by finesse. A rattle at the front, a quiet tap at the back, and then a knock at the side window. 3 knocks. Not the rhythm, not theirs, just 3 blunt requests. Ruby stood. "That's Mr. Howard," she said suddenly. "He owes Wade money. He asked me yesterday if I was still helping you." Marion looked at her. "I didn't tell him anything," Ruby said quickly. "But he was weird. like he wanted me to say something that would let him know. The knock came again, a little louder. Ruby stepped toward the window, toward the thin curtain. But Marion was already moving. "No," she said. "Too late." The curtain shifted. The man outside smiled, lifted a bag, food probably, and nodded like they were neighbors. Ruby hesitated. That's when the child moved. It stood, not quickly, but with a deliberate grace, like it was no longer unsure of its legs. It walked to the edge of the cage, laid its hand against the mesh, looked at Marion. "Safe," it said, clearer than ever before. The word hung in the air like a thread pulled taut. Ruby made a sound in her throat, something between a gasp and a sob. Marion didn't move. The power snapped back on. Lights blinked. The radio in the corner popped with static, then settled into silence. Marion stared at the cage, at the child's face. But the spell didn't hold. The back door opened. Not slammed, not broken, opened. Someone had a key. She heard the cage shift. Turned. A shape was already in the room. Hooded, gloves on. She ran. Too late. The cage dragged backward. Metal screeched. The child made no sound. Marion lunged, knees slamming to floor, but her hand missed the edge by inches. The figure dragged the cage through the hall. The side door slammed. An engine turned over. Ruby screamed. Marion didn't. She was already up, already grabbing her keys, already running. "Get your coat," she said. Ruby didn't ask. They followed the tire tracks before the dust had even settled. The summer earth was dry, but the trail was fresh, weaving toward the edge of the river corridor. Not toward the highway, toward the canyon, toward where things disappeared. They didn't speak in the truck. Marion drove with both hands tight on the wheel, eyes locked ahead. Ruby stared straight forward, fists clenched in her lap. "What do they want with it?" she asked finally. Marion didn't answer. But the words came anyway. "Not a child," Wade had said. "An opportunity." And somewhere, someone was listening. The dust rose behind Landon's truck like a low rolling breath, dry and angry, catching in the throat of the night. The headlights cut through the dark like twin blades, bouncing off every pothole, every twist of sage and dirt and pine. Marion sat in the passenger seat, seatbelt slack across her chest, hands clenched into fists in her lap. She wasn't praying. She wasn't thinking. She was listening for any sound that didn't belong to the engine or her own pulse. Behind them, Ruby sat curled small against the window, arms tight around her knees, eyes wide and shining with fury that didn't know where to go. Nobody spoke, not because they didn't want to, because they couldn't waste the breath. The tracks from the stolen cage had veered off the back road toward an old dirt access path, half washed out, rarely used, but still enough to hold the weight of a pickup if someone knew how to drive it careful. Marion knew where it went. "There's a warehouse up that way," she said finally. "Abandoned last 5 winters. Used to be a bait distribution place." Landon didn't nod. He just pressed the gas a little harder. They arrived to quiet. The building loomed out of the trees like it had been forgotten on purpose. Tin roof peeled at one corner, one of the side walls bowing inward like it had taken too many winters to the chest. The windows were boarded except for one that had been cracked just wide enough to pass a light through. That light moved now. A slow sweep. Flashlight. "Someone's in there," Landon whispered. They parked 50 feet back, killed the lights, stepped out slow. The gravel here was soft, coated in pine needles and oil from years long gone. They crept closer, each footstep placed with care, each breath pulled quiet. Inside the building, the sound of voices. Low, shifting, not yelling, more like negotiating. Landon reached for the door handle. It was unlocked. They pushed it open inch by inch. What they saw first wasn't the child. It was the camera. A tripod, set up against the far wall. Lens pointed straight at a stack of pallets in the center of the room. On those pallets, the cage. Inside it, slumped but awake, the child. Its eyes opened as the door creaked. It didn't call out, didn't flinch. It tapped 3 times. Marion's heart jumped. She moved forward, but Landon pulled her back. Behind the cage, Wade stood with a coil of rope in one hand. Calder Voss, cameraman, local hustler, whatever he wanted to be this week, stood beside him, fumbling with the lens, sweat blooming under his collar. "You get your shots yet?" Wade asked. Calder swallowed. "Almost. We're not going to get another chance. Once it's gone, it's gone." Calder nodded. His fingers trembled as he adjusted the focus. Marion stepped into the light. "It's not a show," she said. Wade turned. His smile came too slow. "Well now, look who found the trail." Landon stepped in beside her, hand on his belt. Not on the gun, not yet. "Let it go," Marion said. Wade tilted his head. "Let what go, exactly? You keep calling it a thing, but we both know it's more than that." He gestured to the cage. "It understands. It listens. It's valuable." Marion stepped closer. "It's not yours." "No," Wade said. "But it's not yours either." He took a step toward her. His boots echoed hollow on the concrete. "You think kindness is enough? You think you can just hide something like this forever? Eventually, the world gets in. Eventually, somebody wants a piece. Might as well be someone who knows the value." "You want to sell it?" Marion said. "No," Wade replied. "I want to introduce it. To science, to investors, to people who can actually do something with it." Calder looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. "You said this was research," he mumbled. "You didn't say anything about buyers." Wade didn't even look at him. "It's not a child," he said. "It's an opportunity." That broke something in Marion. She moved faster than she should have. Past Landon, past Calder, right up to the cage. She knelt. The child was still, but its fingers had worked loose a corner of the latch. Not broken, not forced, just opened. It looked at her. She reached through. "I'm here." It placed its hand against hers. Then, without a sound, it stood. Wade shouted. Landon moved. In the chaos, the camera tipped, crashed to the ground. The lights flickered. And from somewhere outside, a sound rolled in. Not loud, not violent. A low bass hum. It started in the ground, moved up through the bones. Every head in the room turned. Wade froze. The rope dropped from his hand. Another hum, deeper, closer, like something calling across a canyon. Then silence. And then 3 knocks. From outside. Slow. Measured. Calder ran. He didn't scream, just dropped the battery pack and vanished out the back. Wade reached for his hip. Landon stepped in. "Don't," he said. Wade looked at him, then looked past him, at the child, standing, not cowering, not hiding, just there, like it knew it wasn't alone anymore. A shape moved outside, large, slow, a silhouette against the tree line, lit only by moon and distance. More followed, not rushing in, just standing, waiting. Wade backed away. The child walked forward, past Marion, to the door. It tapped 3 times. The door opened, not all the way, just enough, and the night answered. Marion didn't follow. She just stood, let the moment settle. The child turned back, looked at her. She nodded. "You did good," she whispered. It vanished into the dark. And behind her, Landon picked up the camera, not for footage, for what it had seen. On the lens, faint reflections. Too many eyes to count. Later, in the quiet, Landon laid out the maps. Red marks. Trap sites. Not just Wade's. Other names. Other hands. They hadn't just stumbled into something. They'd stepped into a system, and it wasn't done with them yet. The air had changed. Not the weather, but the weight of it. The way it moved across skin, settled into lungs. Early autumn had crept in with its dry hush and crisp yellow edges, folding over Lander like a held breath. The sun hung lower in the sky now, stretched out wide across the horizon like it was lingering before the long season ahead. No more festivals, no more fireworks. Just the slow closing of the year. Marion stood at the edge of the tree line, boots in soil not yet frozen, but no longer warm. Popo Agi River trickled somewhere nearby, its sound soft beneath a scatter of leaves giving up their hold. The world felt like it was shifting again, pulling back from the noise, making room for something older to step forward. The child stood beside her, not behind, not hidden. Upright, alert, the height of a human toddler, but straighter, leaner, more knowing. Its movements were quieter now, not timid, but purposeful. It didn't clutch Marion's hand. It didn't need to. It simply waited. Ruby stood just behind them, holding the pack Marion had insisted on carrying. Blanket, food, the tiny carved trinkets the child had started arranging by instinct. Landon was scanning the ridge. Rifle slung but untouched. His boots crunched dry pine needles with every step. Inez Mar trailed a few paces behind, her field journal clutched to her chest like it was the only way to ground herself in this moment. No one spoke. The clearing ahead sloped gently upward, framed by 2 old firs twisted at the base. Their roots curled around stones as if in silent conversation. Inez had called it a perceptual threshold, the point where wildness began to override human logic. But to Marion, it just looked like the place where the town's reach ended, and something else, older, deeper, began. Let it decide. Inez said softly, "Don't speak, don't reach, don't assume." Marion nodded. The child stepped forward, just a few paces, then stopped. It looked up, not at the trees, but at the empty space between them. Its shoulders shifted, subtle, like bracing for a wind that hadn't come yet. Then it whistled, not a bird call, not a word, just a sound, a tone, then silence. And then shapes began to emerge. First one, then another, then 3 more. All tall, taller than any man, wide-chested, covered in dark matted hair that shimmered brown and auburn in the dappled light. They didn't stalk forward or lurch. They simply appeared, stepping through the layers of forest like smoke becoming solid. They stopped as a group, 20 feet beyond the trees. Not a mob, not a charge, a formation. They stood shoulder to shoulder in quiet symmetry. No weapons, no aggression, just presence. Marion felt her throat tighten. She had imagined this moment 100 ways, some terrible, some beautiful, but none like this. She had expected rage, desperation, a mother tearing through trees. But this was different. This was a welcome. The child turned to her. It touched its own chest, then hers, slow, gentle. Then back again, then softly, barely air, safe. It stepped forward, barefoot over damp moss, and crossed the space between. One of the figures broke rank, larger, fur graying around the jaw, shoulders set like old granite. It stepped forward, bent low, arms loose, and held position as the child approached. No sound, no growl, no cry. Just a hand reaching, and the child leaned in. Marion's eyes burned. The older creature touched the side of the child's face with a tenderness that broke something deep and private. The child didn't flinch. It pressed its forehead gently against the larger one's chest. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then stepped back, looked over its shoulder. Not to Marion, to Ruby. It tilted its head, like memorizing her. Then 1 more step, and it vanished into the circle, folded into that quiet wall of presence and disappeared into the trees without a trace. Inez let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck in her chest for a week. "That," she said, voice cracking, "was a ritual." Marion nodded. "They didn't just come to retrieve," Inez whispered. "They came to honor it." Landon lowered his gaze. "Never seen anything like that." They stood in silence, not wanting to move, not wanting to disturb the space the creatures had left behind. And then, from the ground, near where the large figure had stood, Marion saw it, a shape in the soil. She stepped forward slowly. Kneeling, she found it, a small braid of dry grass, twisted and looped in the same pattern as the one she'd found on the creature's leg when it first arrived. She picked it up carefully. "They tried to save it," she said, "long before we did." Ruby stepped beside her. "You think they left this for you?" Marion looked at her, then back at the braid. "No, I think they're telling us we weren't the first to care." Inez crouched beside her. "That pattern, they use it for wounds, for protection. It's their way of saying, this one matters. Marion stood. They knew someone took it. They tried to bring it back. And failed, Ruby whispered. Marion didn't answer. But her silence was an answer all its own. Behind them, dry leaves rustled. A man stepped out from the trees. Sheriff Bale. His eyes scanned the group. He hadn't come with sirens, no badge in sight, no radio, just him. He took a long breath. What I saw back there, he said, voice graveled, wasn't a monster. Marion didn't move. And what I saw here, he continued, wasn't a threat. He looked down at the braid in her hand. I came to make sure you didn't do something reckless, he said, then looked up again. Turns out, I was the one who almost did. He turned to leave, then paused. You need more time? I can give it. Marion nodded once. That was enough. The light was shifting now, sinking orange, bruising purple at the edges. The trees cast long shadows that moved slower than they should have. Ruby wiped her nose with the sleeve of her sweater. Is it over? No, Marion said quietly. But this part is. They turned to go. No one looked back, but every step away felt like a page being closed, carefully, with both hands. The leaves dropped faster now, yellow spinning down onto pavement like time shedding its skin. By late October, the wind had settled into that tired, familiar rhythm, carrying the sharp scent of wood smoke, distant elk, and the faint metallic tang of coming frost. The tourists had packed up. The last RV rolled through town with a pumpkin tied to its bumper. Lander was shrinking again, curling into itself like it always did before winter came to stay. The vet clinic looked the same from the outside. Hand-painted signs still creaking, chimney still coughing a little smoke. But it felt different to the people who passed by. Some crossed the street now without meaning to. Others slowed down, just enough to glance sideways at the windows, as if expecting to see something watching back. Marion noticed. She noticed everything. The silence in conversations that used to flow. The way folks left her pies on the step but didn't come in. The empty appointments that used to fill her calendar by lunch. No one accused her of anything, but nobody asked if she was okay either. She didn't complain. She never had. She came in every morning like she always did. Turned the key, turned on the heat, swept the floor, fed the strays, cleaned the tools. Routine was an anchor, and she held it tight. The cage in the corner was empty now. She'd left it standing, not because she needed it, but because taking it down felt like admitting something was gone. Ruby still came, every afternoon after school. She didn't knock anymore. Just slipped through the side door and took her seat near the back, sometimes doing homework, sometimes just sitting quiet. Sometimes folding little shapes out of scrap paper and leaving them where the cage used to be. Today, she brought cinnamon bread wrapped in wax paper. They're still talking, she said, setting it on the counter. Marion didn't look up. About what? About you, about it, about what you were hiding. And what do they think they know? Ruby shrugged. That it wasn't an animal. That you were protecting something bigger. Marion placed the scalpel back in its case. Let them think it. They're saying it's gone now, that whatever was here, left, that everything's back to normal. Marion paused, then turned to her. Is it? Ruby's eyes stayed on hers, and slowly she shook her head. No, she said, but I'm not sure I want it to be. Later that evening, the front door creaked open. Calder Voss stood there, hat in his hands, shoulders smaller than she remembered. Mind if I come in? He asked. She didn't say yes, but she didn't stop him either. He walked slow, pausing at the center of the room, eyes catching on the familiar spaces. Exam table, bookshelf, coffee maker with a chipped carafe. I thought about running, he said. After that night, I almost did. Marion leaned back in her chair. What stopped you? He looked at her, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a VHS tape in a clear plastic case. I deleted the master, but I made a copy. Just one. I thought, if I ever needed proof, if I ever wanted to tell it right. You want to be the one who owns the story, she said. No, he said softly. I wanted to be the one who didn't ruin it. She didn't take the tape, just watched him. He set it on the counter. If you want me to burn it, I will. I just thought you should decide. Marion looked at the case. Faint handwriting scrawled in Sharpie on the label. Just one word. Truth. She slid it toward her slowly, then pushed it back. I already know what I saw. Calder nodded. So do I. He turned to go. At the door, he stopped. If I write about it someday, not the creature, not the forest, but you, would that be okay? Marion didn't smile, but her voice had a warmth that hadn't been there for weeks. Only if you write it honest. I can do that. He left without closing the door all the way. Later that week, Landon dropped by with the updated trap reports. More wire snares had been found upriver. Someone else had picked up where Wade left off. It wasn't over, not completely. He laid out the map on the counter. Circles drawn in red pencil. They're not all locals, he said. Some of these traps were done clean. Real professional. Could be a syndicate. Could be a collector. Marion leaned over the map. The lines didn't scare her. They reminded her of the truth. Still out there, still vulnerable. We can't stop everyone, she said. No, Landon agreed. But we can be a problem for them. She nodded. Then let's be one. By Halloween, the tension in town had cooled into something else. Not acceptance, but accommodation. Pastor Gideon helped in the way he always did. Quiet talks on porch steps. Short sermons that said more between the lines than in them. He came by the clinic one afternoon, carrying a basket of root vegetables. You've still got work to do, he said. Not sure how welcome I am these days. You don't need everyone's welcome. Just enough space to keep doing the right thing. Before he left, he stopped at the doorway. There are still things out there worth protecting, Marion. Not everything is meant to be studied. Some mercies are better left unwritten. That night, as the wind picked up, Marion heard it again. Not loud, not close, but distinct. 3 gentle taps, not on the door, not on the wall. On the window frame, far side of the building. She walked toward it slowly, lantern in hand. Opened the window. Nothing but wind. But on the sill, tucked beneath the wood, was a single strand of braided grass. New, tight, damp from rain. She brought it inside, set it beside the old one in her drawer. Side by side, a promise kept. Ruby came by the next morning, scarf loose around her neck, eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks. She looked at the grass, then at Marion. Do you think it misses us? I think it remembers. Ruby sat down slowly. She held a piece of paper in her hand, creased and worn from too many times being folded. I was thinking, she said, about that last word it said. Safe. Marion watched her. I don't think it meant the place, Ruby continued. Not the building. Not even the woods. She looked up. I think it meant you. Marion didn't speak for a long time. Then she reached out, rested a hand on Ruby's. I hope you're right. Outside, the first snow flurries of the season spun through the air, not heavy enough to settle, just enough to remind them that the world turns whether you ask it to or not. Inside, the clinic was warm, and quiet, and waiting. Some stories don't end with answers. They end with quiet, a kind of hush that settles into the corners of your memory and stays there, not demanding to be solved, just asking to be held. This was never a story about science or spectacle. It was never about proof. It was about what happens when you choose to protect something not because you understand it, but because it's afraid, because it's alone, because somewhere deep in you, you recognize that same trembling shape. In a world that teaches us to measure worth by what can be bought, filmed, categorized, or explained, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply not look away, not label, not expose, but guard something wild, something voiceless, with a kind of tenderness that asks for nothing in return. This story was never about what we could gain. It was about what we might lose if we forget that compassion, real, inconveniently quiet compassion, is what roots us to this earth. Not our names, not our ideas, not even our fears. Just the choice, made again and again, to shelter what cannot defend itself. And maybe that's the real miracle. Not that something rare exists in the woods, but that someone looked at it and said, "You don't have to run anymore." We often talk about safety as if it's a place, a home, a town, a locked door. But sometimes safety is a person, a presence, a kind of promise that no matter what the world does or doesn't understand, you will not be turned away. This wasn't a tale of monsters or myths. It was a reminder that the unknown doesn't owe us an explanation. And sometimes the most sacred pacts are made in silence, without signatures or ceremony, but with 3 quiet knocks that say, "I trust you. Thank you for walking through this story with your heart open." If something in it stirred you, made you feel a little less alone in the world, or reminded you of a part of yourself you'd forgotten, we'd love to hear it. Please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone with care. And if you'd like to be part of the stories to come, we warmly invite you to like, subscribe, and stay with us. This is a place for listeners who believe kindness still matters, because it does, always, even in the quiet.